Well, to review this car, first of all, you've got to decide how you're going to review it. Are you going to compare it to all other cars of this kind of size, shape, target market in terms of small family car, kind of daily run around? Or are you going to compare it to its direct comparisons, i.e. other electric vehicles within that sector of the market? Because there is a big difference. In a few years' time, we'll be looking at these kind of things and just calling them cars. We won't be calling them electric cars because all cars will be electric cars. Right now, though, they stand out as being different. But different, I think, can be really very good. You see, electric cars are kind of resetting the boundaries for what we're going to all expect from every car in years to come. And I don't think it's going to be that far down the line either. I'm talking about the benefits of these things, not just in terms of the running costs, the maintenance costs. These things have almost no moving parts, certainly hardly any frictional moving parts. So, there aren't things to service anywhere near as frequently. There's no gearboxes. The brakes, you hardly ever use the brakes because the electric motor does most of the braking for you. And inside that electric motor, there's hardly anything that can go wrong. There's not very much that needs lubricating. There's not very much that needs replacing on a regular basis. So the biggest service item on an electric car is kind of the tyres. Well, that's fine by me. I'll pay for tyres when they run out. The fact that these things can be designed on a completely different level is great. The interior space is brilliant. I'll show you around the inside of this car in a moment, but this is a small family car. It's not designed to be sporty. It's not designed as an ultra high performance car. It's not designed as particularly as a luxury car. It's targeting a sector of the market that's looking for a daily runaround that's got no major frills on it. But actually, within that market sector, it exceeds most of those expectations. As with most electric cars now, the space in the interior, inside the cabin space, is just bigger than we've ever had before. There's enough space for grown adults to sit in the front and comfortably in the rear. I'm 6 foot tall and there is plenty of space in here. And that's with my front seat all the way back for a 6-footer driving the car too. So there is space because you don't have to factor in things like gearboxes that sit down the middle tunnel of these kind of things. The battery is laid out right across the floor in most electric cars. There is no engine, so you can account for all that space with other things. You can push the driver's cabin space forward and backwards and still have room for all the things you actually need. There are various ways to charge it, but it's really easy. Even with the most basic 7 kilowatt charger that you might have installed at home, this thing will charge easily overnight, so when you come out in the morning ready to go to work, it's full and ready to go. You can't say that with a petrol-powered car. If you go to a fast charging unit at service stations up the motorway, this thing will be charged in around about an hour's time. You can even charge it using a 3-pin plug if you pop over to a mate's house and they don't have a fast charger. So there are a number of ways to keep this thing running. It's not the scary prospect that you might think it is if you've never experienced an electric car before. The interior's got pretty much everything you'd need and everything you'd expect. It's got space, it's got all of the functions that you just expect and demand from any car that you drive. This particular model, as you might expect for the press car, comes with all the bells and whistles. And they are lovely. It's got heated seats in the front and in the rear. My kids are particularly excited about the fact the rear seats are heated. But it works very, very well. They're pretty instant. They're great. The interior climate control can also be managed and controlled from an app on your phone that works very well. So when you're in the morning having your breakfast, you look out the window, it's freezing cold. Well, all you have to do is get your phone out, set the temperature to whatever you want. You turn up inside this car and it is gloriously warm. Of course, you don't need to wait as you do with a more conventional combustion powered car. You don't need to wait for the heat to build up in the combustion powered engine at the front to be able to transfer that heat to the interior cabin. With an electric car, that heat can all be generated directly from the energy that's stored in the battery and pumped in here ready for you as soon as you've got your slippers off and your shoes on. It's got nice graphical displays showing you everything from your energy usage to your battery state of charge to your speed and all the normal things that every car might have. It's got cruise control. The thing will drive itself, essentially. Don't forget, an electric car is far easier to have controlled by an autopilot system because there is no clutch, there are no gears to start going through. It's simply a case of using the throttle and sometimes the brake. Speaking of the brake, in this particular car, what Nissan have done is gone very, very aggressive as an option on the regenerative braking. There's a switch down here, Nissan call it the E-pedal. You activate that, and the moment you lift off the pedal going down a road at speed, the car starts to decelerate pretty aggressively. You feel it, you notice it. It's a very different experience to one that you might be used to. It's the kind of thing we talk about an awful lot in Formula 1 and in Formula E, isn't it? Regen, harvesting energy. That's exactly what this is doing. It's turning the electric motor, normally under power, being used to power the car along. When your foot's on the throttle, it's taking energy from the battery source, putting it into the motor to turn that motor. That motor is then connected directly to the wheels of the car, driving it along the road at speed. The second you lift off that throttle pedal, the motor's still being turned, of course, by the momentum of the car, by the motion of the turning wheels that's connected to that motor. It's still being driven. So now the car is driving the motor rather than the motor driving the car. And that motor turns from a motor into a generator unit and starts harvesting energy, starts generating energy to put back into the battery. Of course, that prolongs your range. It's a very, very clever, but oh so simple system. It's something that we look at now, or I look at now, having been lucky enough to drive quite a number of electric cars. Look at it and think, my goodness, why didn't we think of this a long, long time ago? Now, the official figures from Nissan in the books will say that this thing will do over 200 miles on a full charge. But that's a little bit like the emissions figures or the miles per gallon figures that you might get in your more conventional road car from a manufacturer. The reality is that I've found, having driven this over the past week or so, is that with a full charge at temperatures somewhere between 5 and 10 degrees as they are right now here in the UK, I'm getting a maximum of around about 170 to 180 miles on a charge. But to be honest, that's still absolutely fine for most people. You can't review an electric car without talking about the performance. This is not a performance car, but it has the performance of a hot hatch. This thing will generate around about 150 PS worth of power from a 110 kilowatt motor. It has 320 Newton meters of torque, which will get you from 0 to 60 in around about 7 seconds, and that's pretty quick for a car of this nature. When you put your foot down in any electric vehicle, it can't help but give you a surprise. Instant maximum torque from an electric motor is something I will never get bored of. This is not the kind of car that's going to take you around a racetrack incredibly quickly. It's also not the kind of car that if your job means that you've got to be constantly up and down the motorway every single day, this probably isn't going to be for you. Not because it doesn't have the comfort or the space to be able to enjoy long journeys like that, but it has a smaller capacity battery than some of the other cars on the market. But if you are like most people, and bear this in mind, the average UK commuter does less than 20 kilometres every day. Well, if you're one of those people, this has got more than enough capacity, and more than enough capacity to keep you entertained all the way around your journey. I could do that all day long. You can really feel the regenerative braking kicking in quite aggressively when you have the car set in its most aggressive mode like I have right now. It's a really interesting way of driving. It's actually so aggressive and so effective that Nissan say, and I can back up, the fact that you can drive this car almost all of the time by only using one pedal. The styling on this particular model, of course, has been massively updated since the Generation 1 Nissan Leaf. It's quite incredible to think that that first generation Leaf came out over 10 years ago. It was groundbreaking at the time. It was the first mass market electric vehicle. So Nissan disrupted a market. They stole a march on all of their rivals. The biggest challenge now is that that marketplace has become a hotbed of competition. Every manufacturer is clambering over themselves, clambering over each other to bring the next best electric car to market. In conclusion then, this is just a good car. Whether you take it as an electric car or just a car, this is a good car. It's about £30,000 here in the UK with all the bells and whistles, and yeah, that's not a cheap car. But you've got to look at these things as an investment over time because the running costs are so comparatively small. If you look at this as a 10-year investment that you're going to use for the next 10 years every day of your life, you're going to cut down on things like parking, you're going to cut down massively on fuel costs because charging and running a car on electricity is so much cheaper than running it on petrol or diesel. You're going to cut down on things like congestion charges and tolls and all sorts of other things, tax benefits, all sorts of things that will make this the cheaper prospect in the long run. But aside from any of that, it is just a good car. It's fun to drive, it's got space, it's comfortable, it does everything you expect and quite a lot more.